There are complaints from other Arab and Islamic countries that you are misusing Islam as a tool for power, that you've deceived them into financially supporting you early on, telling them you were going to establish a peaceful Islamic state. They voiced opposition to your human rights policies by condemning Sudan at the UN and by refusing to hold the Organization of Islamic States conference in Khartoum, moving it to Jeddah. Economic assistance has also dried up. Would you comment on this?
You know, there was a welcome of the new movement because there was a bill, a Sharia bill, an Islamic law bill, passed unanimously by the previous parliament. And once this government took over, they welcomed it, I mean, because they thought that would overcome the Islamization process. When they realized that the Islamization process is respected also by this government, because it was a unanimously passed bill by the previous parliament, there was absolutely no assistance to the present government by any Arab state since that time, that early, I mean, that early. And the reason why they are worried with the Sudan striking an example, a model of Islamization, is that because it will expose the falsehood of their own Islamic claim.
The execution of 2 U.S. AID workers in Juba has outraged the international community. I'm advised that 2 other aid workers are still missing. Do you know when they or their remains will be returned?
Well, I'm not familiar with the inside story of all this, but I explained
they were executed because it was believed
the execution on the emergency law is like that. I'm an emergency law specialist myself. That's my doctorate. And I saw how people were treated during wars in America itself. All the Americans of Japanese descent, hundreds of thousands of them were detained throughout the war. And all the North Irish people are now being detained previously, and all the Iraqis in England during the Gulf War, although they don't constitute a risk, they were detained. So in emergency times, you can have martial courts, military courts. There is an emergency situation in Juba. There was a military court, and it sentenced 2, and it passed that sentence, was executed.
I'd like to ask you again about the 2 other U.S. aid workers who are still missing. Do you have any knowledge of where they might be, if they're alive?
I personally don't know. There was an attack on Juba by the rebel forces, and hundreds of people in Juba were killed by the rebel forces themselves. And so many people fled away from Juba. They might have fled away from Juba in that instance, or they could have been shot in the exchange of fire between the defense forces inside Juba and the rebel forces outside Juba. But I don't know.
I think people in America would be very interested to find out where the 2 missing people are.
Why didn't American public opinion care about the 200 people killed inside Juba by the rebel forces?
You know, it seems to be very difficult to get news from Sudan. I'm curious as to why Sudan would not issue visas to press much earlier than this past week. Dr. Turabi, 6 main training camps have been cited from which your regime is said to export terrorists to Egypt, North Africa, and the Gulf states. 3 camps are supposed to be on the east coast in the Red Sea region at Harous, Gabet, and Port Sudan, 1 in Kassala in the eastern province, and another at El Jali, north of Khartoum, and another at Wad Sedna, about 12 kilometers from where we now sit. What is your response to this?
Oh, this is an open country. This is an absolute lie. Believe me. There isn't a single Iranian military personnel in this country, not even a military attaché at the embassy, Iranian embassy itself, at all. I mean, and there are no camps in the areas that you mentioned at all. This is an open country. I mean, these are not closed areas for the military.
Why do you have
there are a few Palestinian...
Hamas is represented
No,
here.
no. The Palestinians who were evacuated from Beirut under United Nations and United States command, they were brought into the Sudan. And they are now camped in a few places in eastern Sudan.
I spoke with a representative of Hamas myself last night in the Hilton Hotel.
Yes. And he has absolutely no military personnel here. Hamas, there are very few Palestinians who are Hamas supporters. Mostly they are Fatah supporters, the Palestinians, only 200, 300 Palestinians in the Sudan. But there are Palestinian soldiers who were evacuated from Beirut, you know, when Beirut was dealt with many years back. And they are now there. I mean, That's the only non-Sudanese military personnel in
and there are
in
reports
Sudan.
also that the Abu Nidal people are here in Sudan.
This is an absolute lie, because Abu Nidal himself applied for visa entry in Sudan when we had visa entries, and he was told you have two precedents here in this country of attack against the hotels and against the embassies, and we will never allow a Palestinian of your group ever to come to the Sudan. But other Arabs enter the Sudan without visas, and some Palestinians who were thrown out of Kuwait, you couldn't go back to Egypt or go back to Israeli occupied or to Jordan. Some of them came to Sudan. Very few of them came to the Sudan.
But what about the police, the people's police, who can arrest people at whim because they feel that
there is no people police in the Sudan. In the university, police never enter the university. It has its own security force.
No, there's
its own guard. And there is no so-called popular police.
There's a report, the PDF, I believe they're called.
These popular defense force.
Yes,
these are people who would volunteer.
They arrest people, for instance, if they're out after the curfew.
No, we have no police force. The army has no police force at all. I mean, they are part of the army.
It's not part of the army. It's a paramilitary.
Oh no, there is no such a thing. It has absolutely no police force at all. It's a voluntary service which supports the army, which who are drafted by the army, trained by 2 months, and taken over to serve for 6 months, and then back to where they came from. But the police force is a totally separate force. Totally separate.
But people I've spoken to in the government, other people have admitted that this police force exists. It's a paramilitary group. It's a citizens group.
No.
Very similar to what...
This is a new order which has not...
Yes.
This is a new order for people to volunteer to serve as policemen.
Yes.
For 2 years.
But it's been implemented.
No. It's just being implemented. There isn't a single one yet.
But why even implemented? I mean, the concept is being paralleled to the paramilitary squads.
No, it's not paramilitary. It's trained by policemen. It's trained by policemen, drafted as policemen, but only for 2 years. And then you are allowed to go back. For example, if you are a government official, if you are a student, or if you are anybody, you can volunteer to come and become a policeman for 2 years, and then you'll be sent back to wherever you came from.
Visitors to Cobra prison here in Khartoum this week reported 40 people are being held without charge these past 4 months. There is a universal demand that your regime put an end to such practices. Would you comment?
It shows that thereabout the detainees are between 20 to 40. I mean, but whoever reports, I mean, because these people are released after 7 days, after 15 days, after 1 month.
There are 40 at Cobra that are not.
I don't know. I don't know. But
without charge.
I don't know. But 1 week later, 5 weeks or so, they are immediately released. They have to be released, otherwise, they can complain even during that short course. Their lawyers can go to a court for them, and the court will check that there is a suspicion against them. I mean, but after 3 months it would have to be a formal charge in front of a judge. I mean, and it's only the judge would thereafter order either his release or his bailout or whatever it is. I mean, and this is absolutely true. And anyway, those figures are not very different from reality, but the number changes from 20, 30, 40.
When will your regime allow the Nubians to return to their land? It's said that about 40,000 are displaced and that you forced 4,000 to 5,000 families into Kordofan province because you're pursuing a policy of ethnic cleansing.
No one is forced either to move from his area to another area or back to his own area if he is displaced by natural phenomena like desertification or by war or such things. I mean, these Nubians used to be farmers, in the country farmers, but they couldn't stay in their own farms because there was a security problem over there, and so they flood into the town, and they were told that they could have plenty of farms elsewhere. And they said, we don't mind going there and growing that particular land. And they went there, but they are free to go back either to their town. If there is security there, they can either stay on wherever they were or they go back. It's absolutely free.
Your president has said in his address before the National Assembly recently that, quote, we want to expose the dangers of a new world order, close quote, and saying that he will open embassies in Malaysia, Korea, Central Asia, Mali, Southern Africa, and strengthen ties with Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Syria, and Jordan. What does he mean, expose the dangers of a new world order?
Well, most people here realize that the so-called New World Order is an order of domination. Of course, we are ex-colonial people. We know that Europe, even when it withdrew its colonial forces, continuously by remote control, controlled our economic development, tried to force our culture, and so on and so forth. We don't want a new order which is based on injustice. We love a human order which is very fair, where there is a revision even of the United Nations itself, because it's not really democratic, the United Nations. It doesn't represent in fair proportion the population of the world.
With Iran, your other close ally, strapped for money with $2.5 billion in overdue letters of credit, will you now have to move rapidly yourself with privatization plans?
Well, the privatization...
Because you won't be able to rely on, certainly won't be able to rely on...
We don't rely on Iran at all. Iran is not giving us anything at all. There is absolutely no donation or even loan supplied to Sudan by Iran. Absolutely, I'm quite sure about that. I'm quite sure about that.